Welcome to Real People, No Mask Required. You'll learn about real people facing real life experiences with your host, Liz Younger, licensed clinical social worker.
Hello, my name is Liz Younger, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been in the field since 1988. And today, I welcome you to join me with Real People, No Mask Required. My guest is Lynn Thomas, a retiree who I have had the honor of being acquainted with for quite a long time. So, how are you today, Lynn?
Ooh, I am peachy. Actually, peachy. I'm sitting in my sunroom, Liz.
Well, okay, it's a good day for that. So, to begin with, you have been retired for 11 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Happily so.
Okay. And one of the questions I have is, when COVID hit, the quarantine in particular, it was like March 19th, I believe. What, did you and your husband or family members, what was going on for you when the quarantine first happened?
Well, I have an 85-year-old mother. Thankfully, she's being, she lives at home, but she's being taken care of by two sisters. And that was my first really anxious worry. I thought of her first because she has a lot of health problems. And then thereafter, it was like not being able to see her. That's tough. That was, really, yes, we could do FaceTime, and then eventually we got into the Zoom where we got the whole family. But still in all, it's, when your mother is still here, and, generally I would see her like 2 or 3 times a week, go over there and just hang out. Not that I had to do anything, but I'd hang out with her and my 2 sisters, and hey, it was just great. But then when that's kind of cut off, you realize, that personal touch, you really do miss that socialization and connection to your family. So that was kind of anxious for me. I didn't like that. I didn't like it.
Okay.
And I still don't like it.
You lost those social connections, particularly in the beginning.
Yeah.
The more face-to-face rather than the virtual.
Right.
So
right.
I guess, so you and your husband were quarantined, and what went on in your home related to the quarantine and what it meant to you and your husband and your everyday activities?
Well, my husband and I, we're kind of like low-key people. We go when we feel like it. Pre-COVID, we would just pick up and go or do whatever. But, basically, we enjoy our home. We like being at home. We, with, like I said, the sunroom is like my, it's like a diamond to me. It's really great. And it faces the southern exposure on the back of our house. I love it. My husband, he likes to do outdoor things. And so and he does that whenever he feels like it. His schedule is not real rigid, and neither is mine, other than maybe I practice yoga and meditation every day. That's part of my daily ritual. And then, of course, I can walk in my neighborhood. We live in a nice cul-de-sac, so it's not through traffic, and it's nice. So I'm fortunate for that. I'm fortunate to have those things. Otherwise, I think the fact that my husband and I, we've always, we do a lot of talks, discussions about anything. It could be about the grass, or it could be about, today's current events. It doesn't really matter, but we've always been able to talk to each other across the table. And, he makes me laugh a lot of times. He's got a great sense of humor. And I think for us, we were lucky to have each other because this, even though we were quarantined, other than going out to the drugstore and for groceries, we're basically here. That part wasn't much of a stretch, but not seeing my mother and my sisters and other family members, that to me was really difficult.
Okay, when you did, because obviously the quarantine and the coronavirus presented some real challenges with regards to you being in a high-risk category, as well
Yes.
as going out into those areas such as the supermarket and the drugstore, as you mentioned. And how did that feel for you? Like, what impact did that have on you?
Well, I have to say that was scary because I do have, an immune issue myself. And my husband also has an underlying health, condition. So we're both kind of like, okay, we are not going out anywhere unless we absolutely have to. And, if it was great to do the drive-through or the pickup, curbside pickup, whatever, that's what we've been doing. Now, just this past week, we've done a little bit more, but really we're not really comfortable being out there among a lot of people. I mean, other people, we just aren't.
One of the questions that strikes me is you talked about the curbside. If I remember correctly in our prior conversations, you were not comfortable necessarily picking up from restaurants. Is that correct?
No, that's correct. We have not done that. Although it's wonderful that people are supporting, local restaurants and businesses, we just, we just weren't comfortable. We are not comfortable with that still. We have not done that. I know a lot of people have. One of my sisters, like, there's a place over, a nice restaurant over in Allentown. They do, because she and her husband go there, like, usually, like, when it was open once a week. They would go, like, on a Friday night and, just kind of hang out after work, that kind of thing. And, they've been doing that for the past several years. But, my husband and I, we don't necessarily have a favorite restaurant per se. So we just haven't done it yet.
Okay. I just didn't know if that was related to your concerns regarding the virus and any of that.
Not totally, but it was just, if we didn't have to be out there unnecessarily, we just haven't gone. We just haven't done it. So.
Okay. And again, that's based upon the cautions and trying to prevent infection.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So moving forward, having been in your home for greater than 2 months right now and watching some of the headlines related to COVID and Corona and its spread, like, what were some of the thoughts that you had?
Well, for the first few weeks, I would say for the first 3 or 4 weeks, we were, both of us, looking at different, news outlets, the news, you're I don't know, you just kind of get caught up in that and you're doing it. And then after, like, getting into the 4th week, I was just like, oh my gosh, I really cannot look at television or the internet or any news outlets anymore. I have to really, just kind of do some measured viewing of that. And it got to the point where, I would just, a little bit in the morning. When I say a little bit, I kept the time limit. Like, let me just kind of look at the headlines here. If there's something I'm going to read or listen to, I'll listen to it. But I don't want this to take up more than 30 minutes of my morning time, because I didn't know if that was going to really set the mood for the day. Not that I would be, down or whatever, but it was kind of disheartening, after, like, the 3rd and 4th week. I just, like, okay, I gotta do something else here. I can't be watching the news every minute of the day. I just can't. It just was too much.
What was happening at that point when you just started to realize, like, I need to cut back on this? Like, what were you feeling?
Well, there was one thing that then we kind of realized, like, one of my siblings was ill with this virus, although they did not test her because they didn't have the test at that time. But she was very ill. She was in the hospital for 2 nights.
Wow.
And it was not good, even when she came out, because it was like the next 2 weeks after she came out, she was, having, a lot of the physical issues, connected with this virus. We're talking breathing problems, the fever spiking up and down like every other day, and all of that, and not being able to taste or smell, and just it was hard for us. We had to talk to her husband mostly because she just was not able to even talk a little bit on the phone. I mean, it was just the breath was just going out of her. So that was very worrying. And, so then I wanted to concentrate all my thoughts on her, not so much the national news or whatever is going on in Pennsylvania, that kind of thing, because I was concerned about her. So I thought I can't keep my energies everywhere, but I will keep them focused on family. And that's where I was.
Wow. And so I think it's interesting that you said they only kept her in the hospital for 2 days, and she still
2 nights
to breathe.
Yeah. But I mean, it wasn't anything that, they didn't have to put her on the ventilator or anything like that. But they, I think because there were probably other cases coming in, and maybe she wasn't as critical, I guess, in their estimation. I don't know, I'm guessing. And so, and they gave her, information as to what she needed to do at home, quarantining herself in her bedroom. Her husband, he, stayed in the spare bedroom, that kind of thing, what they needed to do. It was difficult for both of them because, I mean, her husband also had a little bit of, underlying health issues, so it was not good for either one of them, and we were concerned about that. But, what can you really do when you can't literally go over there and nurse her or help her? But her husband did an admirable job, I'm told.
So does she even know where she might have contracted it?
Well, she is a hairstylist, and, she said, I certainly could have picked it up from any one of my clients. That's what she said. She said she has no idea. So.
And again, during the COVID, there was statistics saying that minorities were affected more by COVID. And
that was really disheartening, when it really comes out there, and they're saying it. And then, of course you realize, I personally myself, Liz, I'm fortunate to have good health care from the company I retired from. I'm on Medicare now, but let's say if this would have happened last year, it still wouldn't have affected me because I actually had good health care. But I know so many, and my sister that I was just talking about, she didn't really have health care. I mean, it just, so she's just barely. And then her husband had just gotten a job, I guess, pre-COVID. I guess it was like maybe 2 months before this outbreak, this pandemic. And so then he was able to get, health insurance. So that helped them a little bit. But she herself did not have health care up to that point, so.
So when she was infected, she didn't have health care?
And she did actually, by way of her husband, because he had gotten a job like 2 months before the pandemic. So, that was lucky for her. But up to that time, he had been doing some, like, there were temporary jobs. So, of course, they hadn't had health care for the past, I don't know, could be, year or two, so that was fortunate. The timing was very fortunate when he got this, permanent job. So as permanent as they are these days.
Yeah. I'm just like, I guess what you said, that she didn't seem like that critical of the case, but there's part of you that said she could barely talk on the phone.
Yeah. And it was tough. And she slept a lot, so, and we would, just kind of get, we would call over there, but of course, we're talking to her husband. A lot of times she just was not able to, really be talking to anybody. And then it was tough for her to like even eat, because she couldn't taste anything, couldn't smell anything. And and she said even just to do texting, everything was just very tiring for her, very exhausting. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I kind of think there was more to it. I don't, I'm not going to name the hospital, but I really don't know if, and I don't really have to bring, race into it, but I kind of wonder, did they just kind of scoot her off because, she doesn't seem like she's important enough to really be bothered about. So I kind of wonder,
Wow.
just a thought.
Well, and given all of the reports that we had heard and just the symptoms that you're describing would suggest that she would have benefited from a higher level of care.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
she couldn't text. She couldn't talk on the phone. She was sleeping all day. She couldn't taste and smell. Those are significant symptoms. And to be locked in your room after 2 days in a hospital, it doesn't match with what has been reported.
I was just going to say that I think, really, her story, probably matches up with maybe a lot of other people out there, people of color, or people who just can't afford anything, so yeah, I think that there's a reality there.
Like there was a financial aspect as well as the potential for race. Is that right?
Yes, and I think, this country, for how much we spend on so many other ridiculous things, military wise or whatever, and we don't have health care, like, just basic health care for everyone in this country that's a citizen. I don't get it. I don't get that. So,
well, right,
that
certainly
distresses.
Prior to the pandemic, we talked about the conversation, I'm not going to say the conversation was about high co-pays and premiums and deductibles that were inhibiting people from pursuing medical care, period. So that was like that underinsured issue or not insured at all. And of course, one of the main issues through the pandemic was everybody was so focused on the pandemic that many other health issues were ignored because we were all so focused on the pandemic. So therefore, people who were having symptoms of a heart attack or kidney disease or a stroke or even suicide thoughts, right? They were ignoring it because we were all very focused on COVID and what those symptoms were, and that fear of like being afraid to go get medical care because we might walk into this highly germ infested situation.
Exactly. Yeah, and I had another sister who worked for, she was working per diem, part-time for one of the hospitals, just in the information booth. And she told them that she was not going to be coming to work because of, she actually is one of the caregivers for my mother. So my sister she said, I am not dealing with other people and bringing home who knows what, to my mother. So she, she was per diem. She wasn't necessarily like full-time, part-time or anything like that. So, she could say that, so maybe, she said maybe after this year, she could possibly go back if they would want her or need her. But she said she's not going back anytime soon.
Okay.
So that, she made that decision, and that we were all fine with that.
So towards the last several weeks, there has been race riots and a lot of protests. And what is, in the middle of a pandemic. So what was your experience of that, and what were your thoughts about it?
The very first thought I had was, oh my God, is this like the 1960s again? Are we back to this again? I'm such and such an age, and, we have to still protest and not necessarily whether it was whether some events were violent or not, but here we are. We're still doing this. We're still doing this, and why isn't it better? Why cannot this just be better than what it ever was? And it seemed like for the past 12 years, it's like worse.
Okay.
As far as, that's how I feel about it,
But,
and if I could be out there, protesting with people, I would, but I'm not, I just don't want to really, I'm really concerned about my health. So, but there's always other ways of, support, so.
were you at all like frustrated? Because you mentioned that you felt a part of your sister's treatment may have been based upon the color of her skin. So here we are, and there were several incidences during the last several weeks based upon people's skin color. And of course, we had the protests. Here we had more peaceful protests, but we were able to see on a larger scale, both internationally and just within our country, like people's responses to that situation. And personally, I guess, what was your response? Like, I don't know if you and your husband talked about it, or you and your family talked about it, or if you just had feelings just your own.
No, my husband and I, we even talked about it. I mean, it's all about, why did it have to, I mean, with the pandemic, I would say break everything into these, these areas, the haves and the have-nots. I mean, that's the overall umbrella. And then you break it down into, the race issue. And it's, I have to say, I, was really quite angry, especially when I saw, the murder of George Floyd. And I'm like, I just could not understand that, this man is, saying he cannot breathe. This is going on for like this policeman is kneeling on him for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That is a number. Normally, I don't remember numbers a lot of times, but I remember that one because that's how long it took him to die.
Right.
The anger, the frustration doesn't even like cover that word, but the anger and others since then that have been killed and exterminated, like African Americans are being exterminated. Okay, that there are some people that just don't feel that we have any worth. I don't get that. I am not, I think everyone has a worth. That is, if they're willing to share it with their fellow human. But if they're going to just, use, their power to like stand on the necks of people, that power, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling that. Okay. I don't agree with it. And, and my whole thought to this, I mean, if I could let it consume me. I could, but I choose not to. I don't want that to consume me.
Okay.
But yeah, I understand it. I see it. So
Okay.
I know what's going on. Yeah. You can't ignore it. You can't just say, oh, well, God, that's not affecting me. No, it affects all of us, especially people of color.
Of course.
They don't have to be African American. They can be any other color. I don't care. It affects all of us, really. But more so people of color.
I know that at one point in one of our conversations, you said, I wake up this color every day, Liz, right? And we, I know that there was, and so, you had also talked about, feeling a certain attitude maybe from some of the people you've been interacting with, particularly during the pandemic. And I don't know how maybe the Floyd death somehow may have exacerbated or just added fuel to the fire for you.
It did. I mean, I just feel that it pulled back, Mr. Floyd's murder pulled back the curtain on a lot of people that just sort of like, well, it's not affecting me. I don't have to worry about it. But, then when you have people around the world that have seen that and they're like, what the hell is going on over here in the United States? So, I mean, why is this still such, a black eye, on this country? And you have just regular, people, like even in our school districts, when I would volunteer, and it was just like, you don't see a lot of people of color, let's say, going into the teaching profession. So like, kids don't see teachers that look like them. It has a lot to do with all of it, from the time you're born, from the time you go through the whole slot of, being a human, working, getting married, having kids. But, this whole thing is just like, we are just, I kept saying to my husband, I feel like we're on the last swirl of the toilet bowl. You know what I mean? I'd like to think that we can be better than this, but I sometimes I actually would despair a little bit, Liz. I really would get down. And then I would have to think about how fortunate I am with my family. We've got a close family and all that. So that keeps me, let's say, uplifted.
So as I understand, you had all of these frustrations and as you said, despair swirling around. And one of the ways you coped was, of course, staying very much in contact with your family and your husband. Were there other things? I know you also mentioned yoga, like you do yoga, sitting on your porch, right? Like those things kind of help maintain a certain level of calm and stability and hopefully joy. But was there anything else that you felt you were able to connect with to help buffer some of the experiences you had over the last several months?
I'm kind of like an old school kind of person. I like to send notes and cards. And, you know, the job that I had before, I used to be on the telephone a lot. So sometimes I'm not necessarily a telephone person that I would call somebody,
Sure.
but I will, at the drop of a thought, think, oh, you know, let me just drop a card to so-and-so. And I do, you know. I mean, it seems so tiny, you know, maybe I'm not, you know, maybe speaking to the person. And there are people that I have called. I mean, I do call on occasion. They're friends, and I hadn't heard from them for a while, and I wanted to see how they were doing, or, you know, that kind of thing. But a lot of times I will do that, you know, and I also, in addition to my yoga, you know, I also practice, you know, just maybe 15 minutes a day, you know, meditation after my yoga practice, because then that really centers me. It really does calm. And, you know, if you take a few breaths, and even if it's not like you're meditating, if you can just go outside. Now, today it's a beautiful day. Go outside, for 5 minutes, and no phone, no anything, just maybe stand out there, maybe sit out there in the sun for 5 minutes. It's a help. I mean, it's little, but it's a help.
So you have this whole toolbox that you use to maintain your sanity, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that I'm a strong enough person, but I also think about people that maybe aren't as strong. You know, maybe, you know, I know a few people I have called because I know they suffer from anxiety. You know, you got to check in on them.
Okay.
You really do. You know, you got to, and then once you do, like, maybe talk to these people or check in on them, I don't know, that kind of gives me further strength so that I can go on, you know, and hopefully I've given them some of my strength, you know, just some of maybe whatever, you know, joy that I feel, or even if it isn't joy, maybe I'm just listening. You know, it's not like I have to like advise them on anything or whatever, but sometimes it's just a matter of just listening. And if they know that somebody else is on the other end, that's, you know, that's life-saving, I think.
Of course, you validate them, you make them matter, right? And everybody,
Yeah.
we all could use a little of that, right? Lynn, I do
Yeah.
want to thank you for speaking to me so candidly today. I absolutely look forward to speaking to you in the future, and I thank you for being on Real People, No Mask Required. You have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Real People, No Mask Required. Real stories, real life events, real people. For more information, visit lizyounger.com. That's lizyounger.com.